Hey guys, I'm Gimmick Theft. So I've returned in 2013, and my New Year's resolution is to come up with more regular content and not take off a month in between each video. So I've empowered myself by stealing Zig's hat gimmick and by stealing Hammer's beer and bullshit gimmick. Tonight I want to talk about RPG flaws. But you see, I don't drink alcohol, so this will not be beer and bullshit, rather, let's call this one Coke and bullshit. So, I just want to say the reason that I don't drink alcohol is, well, it just never seemed safe to me, you know what I'm saying? I don't really want to put those weird chemicals in my body. You see, alcohol seemed like a strange habit to me. And okay, a Scorpion is ready. So let's talk about it right now. Let's talk about RPG flaws. Don't let your character sink into the castle. Do not shore up all your defenses. Do not retreat into the darkness. No, give yourself some flaws. Give yourself some hooks. Give yourself some things for the game master to take a hold of and blossom this flower that is the storyline. You see, flaws make you interesting. Never give up your chance to be interesting. Always be A number one. Always be on the A list. Now think about this. Think about this with your mind, your body, and your soul. Think about FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. What do you think about? Think. Oh, Jeopardy theme. Time's up. You think about a gimp-ass president, and he saved us from Nazis. He saved us from the Great Depression, and he wrestled with polio his whole life. And he won these battles because he is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's a perfect 10. He's on the dime, and Lincoln's on a fucking penny. So, first of all, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he beat the Nazis. He said, you think Joseph Goebbels' nutsack was blown off by a meteor? Wrong. FDR yanked that shit off. He said, "Say Auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi balls," and he threw that shit on the ground like Andy Samberg. It's 2009. What? Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Okay, so for that ridiculousness, and this is a bag of sugar, by the way. So I want to talk about flaws. Now, my philosophy is to make your character look like a tackle box. Always be full of hooks. You see, like I said, don't shore up those defenses and put up walls. Let those complications in. When you have flaws, you let in that drama and you let in those storylines and you get interesting. So, this is a video about what are my favorite flaws. Now, let's begin by getting physical. So as far as the physical flaws go, when I create a character, usually one of the physical stats will be low. So for example, I enjoy some sort of oafish brute of a character who has a high strength but a low dex. Or maybe I'll flip it, and that'll be a hollow-boned elf who is very agile but can only go when it comes to melee combat. Now, this next one, this is one I like a lot, although it only works in some systems, is that I like to play an aged character, someone of more advanced years, and with this character I'll have a higher skill set. I'll have more points and skills, but less in stats because his stats have deteriorated with age a bit. So think about like a badass old knight, someone who's a great veteran, but his body isn't what it used to be, but his skills are high because of all this experience. So he realizes that he's a person who has to fight smarter rather than harder, and when he does that, he can still keep up with all them young whippersnappers. But my favorite physical flaw by far is hideousness. Yes, Nosferatu from Vampire, or a one-eyed half-orc, or perhaps a gnoll who are hideous to begin with, but he's been given a Glasgow grin, but only on one side. So he's sort of got this permanent psychotic sneer / grin going on. And I enjoy these characters who are flawed and scarred on the outside because it begs the question, does the inside reflect the outside? When society calls you a monster do you become? Well, that's the character's choice and that's the character's journey. It can be different for each character. For example, the Hound from Game of Thrones, he has fully embraced his monster's look. He looks like Two-Face, and inside his soul is nothing but rage, and yet we still get these glimpses of this sad, this tragic, and this sympathetic character inside. Now, my favorite character from one of my favorite shows, Boardwalk Empire, is Richard Harrow. And he is a World War I veteran who had half of his face blown off and he lost an eye in World War I, and he's a veteran and he's come back, but this is in the 1920s, and so society doesn't want to look at him. They push him away, they keep him at arm's length, and he's just trying to assimilate back into normal society, but the things he's seen and the things he's experienced keeps him from connecting with anyone, though he desperately wants to. And in fact, he finds himself pulled into the criminal fraternity where he finds employment and he finds some brotherhood. But he doesn't like the life of crime, and he seeks and he searches for something more, and he seeks for something better. Now, this is similar to Tyrion Lannister, who, though twisted and stunted on the outside, inside he has a relatively pleasant soul, and I find characters like that very interesting. Now, speaking of scars, now there is a physical flaw that always has a story. So think about a character who is hideously scarred, or they're missing a limb, or they're missing an eyeball. That is a flaw that has a story behind it. So, the gunslinging monster hunter from the Deadlands setting, he's missing his left hand, and that comes from a tale in which he fought against a horrid beast, and it clamped down on his hand, and he took his revolver and shoots it through the eye into the brain, and it dies, but it's remained clamped on his hand, and he had no recourse but to take out his bow and knife and sever his own hand so that he did not join the creature in death. Now, for the mental flaws, I enjoy me some insanity. Nosferatu and Malkavians, these are the vampires that I like the most. Now, I like a character who is excellent at what they do, excellent at their chosen field, but they're also nuts. And so you cannot fully rely on this character, you cannot fully trust what they say, but most of the time, they know exactly what they're talking about, they know exactly what they're doing. But sometimes it's hard to discern what is madness and what is excellent advice coming from this character. Now, the next is sort of physical and mental flaws, and this is addictions. Now, we can be talking about chemical dependencies, gambling addictions, or even the blood addiction that all vampires have in Vampire the Masquerade. See, that's sort of a free flaw that your vampire character gets. Every single one is a blood junkie, and this makes them very dangerous when they get very desperate. So whatever your character is addicted to informs a lot about that character. So think about I played a dwarf with a massive gambling addiction. And the reasoning behind this was because dwarven society was so rigid, it was so static, it was so unchanging, and it was so risk adverse that this dwarf, he loved games of chance. He loved just tossing those dice and just leaving it into the hands of fate. He loved not having control even for a little bit. And of course, winning a bunch of gold is pretty fun for a dwarf too. And imagine like a character who's addicted to downers. He's into hobgoblin opiates. Now, this is a veteran adventurer, and he's trying to forget the horrors that he has seen in his adventuring career. I mean, aboleths and mind flayers and ghouls bubbling up from the ground. He's trying to forget. Or think about the same veteran warrior is instead addicted to uppers. And instead of trying to forget, he's an aging warrior, and he feels that he needs an alchemical edge to stay on top, to just survive. And now, he's taking these alchemical uppers, and he's, constantly on edge, and perhaps has the fantasy version of roid rage going on. So there's that. But my favorite flaws are social. I enjoy the outsider characters. I enjoy planar outsiders, social outsiders, or perhaps just Sean Connors talking about RPGs. I enjoy them all. Now, most RPG characters are outsiders. If you're a model citizen, you don't end up becoming an adventurer and traveling around the countryside hanging out with some weird dwarves or something. It's gross. So, most of the characters are outsiders anyway. But I enjoy playing characters who are on the outs, as it were. Perhaps they're part of a minority religion that is persecuted, or perhaps they're part of a low class and they're thieves and rogues. Or perhaps it's a racial thing, like playing as an orc or a goblin in a human kingdom. They've got all sorts of interesting problems and social flaws with that. Now, perhaps a character like an ogre ex-slave. He was captured and forced to mine in a quarry. But one day he had a spiritual epiphany. He felt the beating heart of Earth, of Gaia itself, and he managed to escape. But now he is filled with the love of the earth, but hatred for whatever society it was that enslaved him. And hate and love are constantly at war in this character's heart. Or perhaps a character like an ambitious bastard of a noble house. He is heir to the noble house, but he is a bastard, and therefore society shuns him. Though he is a noble, and this character, because society has told him that he is crap, a massive ambition burns in his heart. It is his burning drive, and it is fueled by a massive inferiority complex. He wants praise, and he wants acceptance, and he very well probably wants love, but because of his inferiority complex, he will lash out with rage at the slightest slight to his honor or to his name. And so those are the merits of the flaws that I enjoy. Now, I enjoy playing flawed characters, but I don't combine all of these at once. I don't take a physically hideous, mentally unstable, and socially unacceptable character, because then I'd just be role-playing myself. So, those are the flaws I like. And for the flaws for your character, it doesn't matter if your character is battling to rise up above their flaws, or if they are struggling as they're brought down by their flaws and they sink under those dark waves. Whatever you do with a flawed character, one thing is for sure: they are going to be awesome.